Let's talk about retail real quick. One of only a handful of jobs where you're responsible for an insane amount of money, daily interact with a long line of individuals who are most of the time fairly apathetic, and in my case have pretty much nothing to show for myself despite being in the same spot for well over 2.5 years and awkwardly flapping barcodes in a machine that never quite worked as well as it should have. Well, I have a pretty massive arsenal of crazy stories from my time working for a major Texas grocery store chain. Today, I'm going to focus on 2 moments specifically. The first one I've entitled Law-Abiding Citizen. In the glorious state of Texas, the current legal drinking age is 21. And during our training period, they spent a lot of time making sure we understood all the ramifications of selling alcohol to someone underage. They actually had a step-by-step process in case the situation ever presented itself. Gently remove the alcohol from the conveyor belt, place it out of reach of the customer, then politely look at the customer and inform them that Texas state law prohibits you from selling them alcohol at this current moment. The mere thought of this situation transpiring was terrifying to me. I am not a confrontational person, but in high school, I hated confrontation. Legitimately, if anyone that looked under the age of 35 put beer on my conveyor belt, I would start to freak out a little bit. A few months into the job, however, lo and behold, it happened. A young lady and her boyfriend slid into my line and began to unload their groceries, and it didn't take me long to take note of the case of beer that was in the cart. So, being the professional cashier that I was, I asked to see the woman's ID, which she provided me without hesitation. Immediately, I was overcome with horror. For you see, in bold lettering across the top of the driver's license were the words, under 21. Okay, all the training I went through, the anxiety, I'm a junior in high school for crying out loud. I can handle this. I gently took the beer from the conveyor belt and subtly placed it on the ground beside me, looked at the woman, and said, "Ma'am, Texas state law prohibits me from selling alcohol to you at this time." I did it. The look on that lady's face was one of utter confusion, and I felt like a champion. It was at this moment that her boyfriend chimed in. "Dude, she's over 21. Does this guy think I'm an idiot?" The woman, still a little confused, assured me she was over 21, but what they didn't seem to realize was the fact that I was holding the very evidence in my hand. I very politely drew attention to the bold lettering at the top of the driver's license and rested my case. With no humor whatsoever, the boyfriend then retorted by drawing attention to the actual birth date on the driver's license. In my panic, I completely forgot that most Texas driver's licenses don't just change the second someone turns 21. So after taking a closer look at the date and running some quick math in my head, I realized that she was well over 21, and I felt like a huge moron. The ironic part, that was the only time I ever had to tell someone I couldn't sell them alcohol. And not only did it absolutely backfire, but as I reached down on the floor and awkwardly handed the beer back to the couple, man, the boyfriend gave me the stink eye something awful, and I will never forget that. All right, now time for a story where I'm not the ignorant speed bump in someone else's life. I've entitled this one, Donuts on the House. One of the more popular sections of the grocery store that I worked at was the bakery. Every morning they would bake and prepare a special batch of donuts and other such pastries and place them in a prominent display case for passing customers. And I'd be lying if I didn't admit that every time I had an errand that would take me by the bakery, those donuts were calling my name. But here's the thing. While there wasn't a full-time employee overseeing the distribution of the pastries, they did in fact cost money. And it wasn't a ton, mind you. I'm pretty sure they were somewhere around 50 cents or so. But what they weren't was free. For 99% of customers, this was never an issue. They would simply bring the donuts to the counter or inform me that they had a few while shopping. But one day, we were especially slammed, and my line was a little bit longer than it normally would be. While tending to a customer with a pretty massive order, I glance up, and roughly 2 or 3 people back, I notice a mom with her young daughter. And as plain as day, the mom is cramming a chocolate glazed donut into her own mouth incredibly aggressively. Now, I consider myself to be a fairly optimistic individual, so I didn't think too much about it. I went back to what I was doing, and a few seconds later, I decided to take another look. And the woman was now shoving a second chocolate glazed donut into her daughter's mouth. And this wasn't a, "Oh, this is so good, you gotta try this, baby," approach. This was more of a, "You need to eat this as quick as possible before anyone sees you" maneuver. Again, I'm an optimistic person, so I took this observation and decided to file it away in my data bank of soon-to-be-forgotten misunderstandings and continue doing my job. When the woman finally arrived at my conveyor belt and began to unload her mini groceries, I initiated some small talk because, I'm a professional. How's your day going? Did you find everything you were looking for? Etc. After she had unloaded all her groceries, there was still no mention of the donuts yet, so while she was looking at the candy shelf, I politely inquired, was there anything else she wanted to add to her order today? And without missing a beat, she looked me right in the eyes and said, "No, thank you." And right as she turned back to look at the candy shelf, I took note of a small streak of chocolate glaze on the outside of her mouth. Okay, here's the thing. I realize that I'm kind of making a mountain out of a molehill here, and y'all are probably like, "PJ, it's just a couple of freaking donuts." But y'all have no idea how many parents would come into my line and inform me that their child had either broken an item or eaten a donut while their back was turned. And the reality of the situation was, they didn't have to do that, but they did because it's the decent thing to do, for crying out loud. Not only did this lady conveniently forget to inform me about her trip to the bakery, she also made what I perceived to be as an active, albeit futile, attempt to keep this from me. And that day, well, I wasn't really in the mood to let her get away with it. So, when a sudden outburst from her daughter caused her to look in the opposite direction, I swiftly added 2 donuts to her ticket. I'd be lying if I didn't admit that a smile crept across my face as she left the store, completely oblivious that those donuts weren't, in fact, on the house.